Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says Goodbye sets up committee to look into Colombo port concerns. Before we understand what the present scenario is, let's look into the background. There was an agreement that was signed between Sri Lanka, India and Japan. This was an agreement to jointly develop the Easter Container Terminal where in Colombo port. The joint initiative was estimated to cost about 500 million to about 700 million dollars. What is this agreement all about? The agreement says that India and Japan will invest the money into this project. They will develop this particular project, but operations will be jointly conducted by India, Japan and Sri Lanka. It further says there will be establishment of the Sri Lankan Ports Authority. What this will do is it will retain 100% ownership of this Easter Container Terminal. However, a new company called as the Terminal Operations Company will be put up and this will conduct the operations jointly. So here what we will have is Sri Lanka having about 51% and India and Japan will have about 49% for joint operations. But ultimate control will be with the Sri Lankan Ports Authority. The ECT, or what we can also call as East Container Terminal, is very close to the port city. This port city is being developed by China, and that is the prime reason India and Japan will have a geopolitical significance for its development. So because it is being constructed close by to the port city, which is also being developed by China, India and Japan will also have an edge with respect to its position. What is the importance of this particular project for India? Kindly remember, this is on the southwestern part of Sri Lanka. When you look at this particular part, about 90% of its operations in Sri Lanka happens in this particular port. That is, all the goods from Africa, from Asia and multiple other countries from Europe will bring their goods onto this southwestern platform in Colombo port, and majority of these operations and goods is exported to India as well. So the most significant factor is because 90% of its operations in Sri Lanka happens in the Colombo port, about 70% of the transshipment business from this port happens with respect to India. We also know about the fact that China is increasing its influence in the Indian Ocean region. It is building up infrastructural projects in Sri Lanka as well. So growing influence of China in Indian Ocean can be a threat to India as well as for Japan. So in order to reduce the growing influence of China in Sri Lanka in Indian Ocean, this project becomes very important. Why? As we initially discussed, there is development of port city by China, and this Easter Container Terminals project is very close to the port city. So this helps India and Japan to curb the menace of the Chinese influence in Sri Lanka and in Indian Ocean. As we initially discussed, Sri Lanka also has a geopolitical significance. With this, India and Japan will also secure the sea lanes which goes through Sri Lanka is some of the important parameters for India. But why has Japan invested in this particular project? The ECT project is particularly important. Why? Because Japan's primary maritime routes run through the Indian Ocean. So as they run through the Indian Ocean, in case they have to ensure that the security of tankers or their commercial ships will have to be taken care, that is where Sri Lanka will provide advantages to Japan. And also Japan wants to curb the growing menace of this particular country called China in Indian Ocean, and as a result of which Japan has also invested in Sri Lanka. So this geopolitic and geostrategic location of Sri Lanka makes it important for both India as well as Japan to invest in this East Container Terminal. What is the present scenario? As we have looked into the background, India and Japan would be investing in this particular project, but people in that particular area were not happy with it. Why? Because they felt that their national assets were being given to some other country like India as well as some other country like Japan. This raised concerns for the workers and they started voicing opinion against this project with the Sri Lankan government. The Sri Lankan government in the present scenario has appointed a panel. This panel will have about 5 members, and what they will do is examine and report on the concerns regarding the project. They will look into all the agreements between India, Sri Lanka and Japan. They will look at financial implications, what would be the cost benefit analysis for Sri Lanka, and ultimately recommend a way forward with respect to this project. So what we have to understand is importance of this particular project for India and how it will be unfolding in the near future is what this article all about. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Multimodal Transportation of Goods Act. The Commerce Ministry is considering to replace this act. Why? Because it wants to bring massive changes with respect to the logistics sector so that there is promotion of growth in this sector. How does it want to do it? By coming up with a new legislation, and that is in the form of National Logistics Law Efficiency and Advanced Predictability Act. So what is existing right now will be replaced with the new legislation, which is what is the present discussion all about. What is this multimode transportation as given under this article? As the article denotes, multimodal transportation refers to a combination of more than one mode of movement. It includes rails, roads, sea, end-to-end delivery of goods. Let me simplify this for you. Let's suppose we are importing oil from Saudi Arabia. So it is being brought by the ships. So these ships get the oil and they are ultimately put in the port city. And from the port city, you do not have the provision of shipping for the entire South India or for the North India. So what happens from the port city? You have the railways that are used to send this particular oil, or there is use of road to send this oil. So what we mean by multimodal transportation is use of more than one means of transportation to deliver the goods from the source to the destination. In this particular case, we have the ships in the first case, followed by railways or the road, where effective transportation mechanisms are used to deliver this product or the goods from the source to the destination. This is what we mean by multimodal transportation. Now we have to understand what is this logistics all about. This is nothing but moving of a particular good from the point of its origin to the point of its consumption. So the requirements of all the consumers will have to be kept up by the logistics team. So this will require planning, this will require implementation, and how the flow of this particular good happens from the source to the destination. So while all this is happening from the source to the destination, you would also require storage of this particular good. So this entire planning as to how the good moves from the source to the destination is what is called as logistics. So basically it encompasses all the transportation, warehousing, material handling, protective packaging, control, marketing, as well as customer service, ultimately reaching the customer. Now the question is, why is the government wanting to bring massive changes in this logistics sector? India's logistics sector is highly fragmented. The government of India believes that as of now we have about 14% of the GDP which we are investing on the logistics sector, and this means we have increased the cost for moving a particular product from the origin to the destination. This will ultimately have to be reduced to less than 10%, and that is the primary reason the government of India wants to bring new reforms with respect to the logistics sector. As far as India is concerned, its infrastructure can be viewed as a major hindrance to the logistic business. Why? Because the poor infrastructure means inefficient transport system, which means there'll be delay in the process, which means there's increase in the cost, and ultimately because of delay and increase in the cost, what we have is inefficient and unreliable transport system, and as a result of this, the country's export will also suffer and the export of the cost will also increase. So higher logistic costs lead to higher export costs, which indirectly impacts the competitiveness of the Indian goods in the international market. Therefore, the government wants to bring massive changes in the logistics sector. Why? Because this will give impetus to the trade and enhance competitiveness and also improve India's ranking in the logistics performance index. In order to bring massive changes in this sector, that is why the government in the near future is planning to bring about this act by coming up with the new legislation. Once we have this legislation, we will look at all these features and discuss once again. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says pathogens and prediction. In a research conducted by the scientists from China, they have discovered a new strain of H1N1 swine flu virus. This is spreading silently in the workers who are working in pig farms in China. In this particular backdrop, we have to understand what is this new strain, what could be the implications, and what is the importance of surveillance with respect to the new strain. Traditionally, when you look at pigs, they catch variations of flu. This is not a big deal. Why? Because this was not impacting the human beings. Two such examples were African swine fever and classical swine fever. They were not being transmitted from the pigs to the human beings. But of late, what we have is certain strains of viruses which is getting transmitted from the pigs to the human beings. One such strain is what we call as G4EAH1. What does it stands for? It stands for genotype for reassortant duration avian like H1N1. Kindly remember, this swine flu strain has genes which are similar to those in the virus that had caused 2009 flu pandemic. They also found that this particular virus can also infect the human airway cells as well. As a result of this devastation, we do not know whether the human beings have all the tools, the antibodies to fight this particular strain. And at the same time, the researchers have also not confirmed if there could be a possibility of human to human transmission because of this particular strain. The same happened with COVID-19 as well. Initially, they had said that this will not be a human to human transmission, but eventually it turned out that human to human transmission was prevalent in COVID-19. So as of now, the same has been said with respect to this, that there would be no human to human transmission, but we do not know what can the scientific community conclude in the near future. Now that we have understood what this strain is all about, we have to take some precautionary measures. These precautionary measures can be divided into two parts. One is the short-term measures, the other is the long-term measures. When it comes to the short-term measures, we basically will have to prevent the spread of virus from one farm into another. Let's suppose there is one farm which is completely infected right now. This has to be isolated and this should not be let to spread to another farm as well. Close monitoring of the human population in this particular region also becomes very important. So isolation of farm as well as workers in the swine industry is the short-term measure that we have to take up. When it comes to long-term measure, we have to look at surveillance. What is this surveillance? Basically, every country has what is called as disease surveillance mechanism. What do every country do? They basically look at various types of viruses, protozoans, bacteria, and they try to discover whether this particular strain, virus or a bacteria could become a major issue for its population. So what it basically involves is detection of a virus or a bacteria, get the data of this particular bacteria or this particular pathogen, collect the information, analyze it, assess it and timely report it and give it to the length and breadth of the country as well as the global community. Basically, when you speak about disease surveillance system, it is about identification of the new pathogen, understanding this new pathogen and giving this entire information to the country as well as the global community. To bring all these aspects into practice, what we require is certain structure. That structure is what we call a surveillance system. So this will detect and report the cases. Then what we have is the laboratory settings where all these tests are conducted. They will identify the cause of illness, followed by the workforce which is able to identify what is the issue, and ultimately we require the emergency management system to coordinate all the responses with respect to this surveillance system. Some of the successful attempts because of this surveillance system that was prevalent in the country was with respect to predicting the dengue as well as the Ebola outbreaks as well as cholera and diarrheal disease with respect to a specific and the localized condition. These have been some of the successful attempts in the past. This article further makes a mention about global outbreak alert and response system. This was established by the World Health Organization in the year 2000. So kindly remember, this was established by the World Health Organization. Why? As a key mechanism to engage all the stakeholders, technical agencies for identifying, confirming and responding to the major international public health emergency. In case there is an issue that surfaces in any part of the world, this technical emergency immediately steps in and they would provide response to this public emergency. Therefore, this G4 virus might emerge into a pandemic in the near future. We do not have any idea about it. It can become a human to human transmission. We do not have any idea about it right now. So what we can do is to have some precautionary principles in place. So the need of the hour is greater vigilance in the present scenario. Apart from this, vigilance is also required because this is a new strain and the humans can become susceptible to this very new strain, and because the humans have no inbuilt immunity from this particular virus, vigilance and precautionary measure is the need of the hour. All risk assessment systems across the world will also have to be activated is what this article all about. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says, why has Indian Railways opened doors for the private players? The Ministry of Railways has invited requests for qualifications from the private investors to operate train services in more than 100 destinations. In this particular backdrop, what we have to understand is what is the importance of private sector in the railway operations, what are the various advantages of them entering the railway operations, what are the key challenges and what is the way forward. First up, let us understand what is the meaning of request for qualification. There are a number of companies which would be very happy to operate in railways. Why? This would bring them huge profits, but the government cannot give permission to every company. So what the government does, it brings up certain parameters. It scrutinizes the profile of the company. It looks into whether the company would be able to adapt to the scenario. It looks into the technical parameters of the company. So understanding, scrutinizing and giving the permission to the company is what is called as request for qualification. So the companies will put an application whether they are right, whether they have the qualification to ensure that this particular operation can be conducted will be checked by the railways. Followed by this, we have something called as the bidding process, and that bidding process is what is called as request for proposal. After the companies are identified, the bidding process is done. It is the Indian Railways which will decide what routes that they will have to travel. So these trains will be manufactured in India under the Make in India initiative. Most of these trains will have at least 16 coaches and they will have a maximum speed of about 160 kilometers per hour. When it comes to the private players participation, they will have to ensure that they are financing this operation, they're conducting the operations of the railway and ultimately maintaining the modern passenger trains is what is the initial objective of the private participation in the railways. There have been several committees in the past which have looked at this particular role of private participation in the railways. One such committee is what we today have as Bibek Debroy committee. This Bibek Debroy committee came up with a recommendation. They said that railways need not be privatized, but they will have to be liberalized. So when you look at liberalization, it obviously means that complete privatization cannot be initiated, but we should have certain private players coming into the role of railway. Why? Because this will increase the competition, this will provide the customer satisfaction, and ultimately what we will have is that consumers and customers will be happy with the private services. It also made it clear that a regulatory mechanism was also a prerequisite for the healthy competition between the government as well as the private. So this will also require and make sure that all the stakeholders, the government, the private and any other player involved in this particular process, their interests are also protected by this regulatory mechanism. So there would be a provision of private industry, and what we will also have is a regulatory mechanism so that all stakeholders' interests are protected. Now the question is, why private players are required? The objective of this initiative is to introduce the modern technology into the fold of railways. So the railways, when it introduces, it will reduce the maintenance cost, reduce the transit time, boost the job infrastructure, provide enhanced safety to the customers, provide world-class travel experience to all the passengers who have been traveling through these private operations, and also reduce the demand supply deficit in the passage transportation sector. Overall intention of the railways is to introduce new travel experience for the passengers who are used to traveling in air conditions as well as in the aircrafts. From the passenger perspective, there is also a need for more train services, for example, between the important cities. Let's say, for example, people are traveling more from Delhi to Bombay. This currently does not have requisite number of trains. So with private operations increased in the near future, what one can sense is more number of trains, more number of services from important cities to another city. The Railway Ministry has also decided that about 30,000 crores of private sector investment will also boost this particular sector. As a result, the private sector has been involved in the railway operations. While all this was happening, we have to ensure that there are certain things which are left to the private sector, there are certain things which is left to the government sector. What will be those areas which will be controlled by the private operators? They will basically decide on the technology as well as the fare between the source to the destination. So who are the ones who are deciding the fare? It is the private sector. So all the onboard services like the entertainment, food, cleanliness, passenger amenities and fare collection will be decided by the private sector. With this, the private agency is providing the services and is also taking some services from the Railway Ministry. In return, the private operators will have to pay fixed haulage charges, that is the transportation charges, energy charges on the basis of actual consumption, and a share of their gross revenue to the railways because they have been using the services of the railways. But certain aspects like safety, timetabling of the trains will all be decided by the Railway Ministry. Why is this move very significant for the Indian Railways? Let's look at some of the statistics as given under this article. According to data maintained by World Bank, in 2018, India had 68,443 kilometers of railways. It is among the fourth largest rail networks in the world, along with United States, China and Russia. Although every kilometer of the track in India covers geographical area much less than Germany, Russia, China or Canada. Now with the operation of the private agency, we would be able to expand this particular growth and we would be able to reach the remote corners, and that happens to be the significant factor. Further, the article says it was estimated that 1 rupee push in the railway sector would have a forward linkage effect of increasing the output in other sectors by about 2.50 rupees. What do we mean by this forward linkage? Let me explain what this forward linkage is with respect to a simple example. Let's suppose Britannia as a company establishes its food processing industry. Britannia is known for its biscuits, it is known for its cakes as well as breads. After it has come up with its food processing industry, what we have is logistics sector that is developed. This logistics sector helps in moving of the goods from this particular region to another region. So the logistics sector becomes what is called as forward linkage. What is backward linkage? Let's suppose it is established in Uttar Pradesh. So it will require wheat. So wheat becomes the backward linkage. So when an industry is established in a particular area, the prospective one is what is called as forward linkage, and what are the goods that is required for this particular industry that has established is what is called as backward linkage. So what this article says with respect to railways, in case railways is investing about 1 rupee, what we will have is a prospective profit of about 2 rupees 50 paisa. But there are various concerns as voiced under this article. What are these concerns? When you look at the government sector, it is basically into social service. We collect the taxes, and these collected taxes will also provide subsidies to a class of passengers. So the rate of the railway ticket can be comparatively reduced when the operations are conducted by the government. So what can be at 500 rupees is obviously reduced to about 50 rupees. Why? Because the government is providing the subsidy. Why? Because the government has to provide, and it has an obligation under social justice. But the same is not for the private sector. The private sector is all about profits. It is about revenue generation. Private sector will not subsidize these rates, and ultimately the people are the major sufferers, are some of the important concerns under this particular article. So what is the way forward? As the Rakesh Mohan committee had pointed out, the international experience was not that good when it comes to privatizing railways. It also showed exceedingly difficult and controversial steps as well. So what we have to ensure, keeping this in mind, social welfare concerns as well as the subsidies given to different class of people, a pilot project will have to be initiated, and after looking into all these issues, adjusting the framework, fine tuning the rules and regulations, only then this will have to be implemented full scale is what this article all about. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says the impact of the Chinese apps ban. This has been explained on 30th of June 2020 under the first topic, TikTok among 59 apps banned by the center. An elaborate analysis about this entire issue has been explained in this video. In this particular article, we will discuss on two important concerns voiced under this article. One is the unofficial version of the apps. The other is the source of the income. What is this unofficial versions of the app? Let's suppose there is a particular app. The same app will be installed on the Play Store or on the Apple Store as given by the company. Now let's suppose there is a ban of this particular application. So what would happen? They would not be able to download onto their phones from the Play Store or the Apple Store. So what would people do is they would download unofficial version of the apps from outside sources. This is not the official version given by that particular company, but this will be the unofficial version where they are downloading from the third party sources. What is the major issue? When this particular version is downloaded by that particular individual, this will ultimately harm the person's phone or his laptop. This means all the security updates time and again given by that company will not be provided under the unofficial version of the app, which is provided under the official version. So this could become a security issue, and their phones or their laptop could become a reservoir for the virus, trojans or worm is the first important concern. The second important concern is with respect to the source of income. There were a number of content developers, Indian creators, who were having the only source of income. They used to create content, and their content also got in number of advertisements. This also brought in an income for all these people, and many of these apps had also established officers and employees in India. Now with the resultant of this particular ban, their only source of income is now gone. The officers and the employees in those companies will also be the major sufferers, are two important concerns with respect to this article. But the entire analysis of this particular article has already been discussed, so kindly look into it. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Consider the following statements. Infant mortality rate in India has improved from 2016 to 2018. Disparity between female and male mortality rates among children is slowly closing in. Infant mortality rate is more severe in rural India than in urban regions. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3. All the three statements that are given are correct with respect to the infant mortality rate. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Kindly remember, Madhya Pradesh has recorded highest infant mortality rate, and it is Kerala which has registered third lowest infant mortality rate. The country's average stands at 36 deaths for rural and 23 for the urban areas. Why is this infant mortality rate increasing? There are number of reasons for this. Increasing premature deliveries, infections, birth asphyxiation, delay in securing treatment leading to complicated deliveries are one of the cause. The second major concern is with respect to the birth spacing. When you're planning to have the second kid, the ideal time for the gap is about 3 years. But when the gap is about 1 to 1.5 years, there could be this mortality rate is the second major concern. High malnutrition levels is the third concern, and antenatal checkup for the pregnant women have been completely minimal. This is the fourth concern. So how do we overcome this issue? Antenatal and postnatal care will have to be provided. Primary healthcare systems will have to be ramped up, and at the same time encouraging community referrals and ensuring timely treatment is the need of the hour. Another important factor is kindly remember these definitions. Stillbirth, where the baby dies in the womb after 20 weeks of pregnancy. Neonatal death, death during first 28 days of the life. And post neonatal mortality, newborns dying between 28 and 364 days. Kindly remember these facts. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to the Real Estate Regulation and Development Act, which of the following statements are correct? The Real Estate Regulatory Authority will monitor as well as adjudicate, arbitrate any disputes with respect to real estate projects in the concerned state. If any of the RERA's decision regarding a complaint is not satisfactory, the aggrieved party can submit an appeal to the High Court directly. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is one only. Why? Because this will have to go to the tribunal and not directly to the High Court. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, if one is not satisfied with the decision made by RERA, they can file a complaint with RERA Appellate Tribunal within 60 days. They can further approach the High Court within 60 days if they are not satisfied with the Appellate Tribunal's decision. They cannot directly go to the High Court, but instead they have to go to the Appellate Tribunal first. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements. One amino acid change in hemoglobin can lead to anemia. One wrong amino acid in the proteins of islands can also lead to cataract. Which of the above statements are incorrect? It is asking for the incorrect statement. So the answer to this is none. Why? Because both these statements are correct. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, if a wrong interpretation of the genetic code at the protein level occurs, it will lead to functional disorders or even diseases. Now let's look into the next practice question. The cellular and molecular control of programmed cell death is known as apoptosis. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, programmed cell death is called as apoptosis. That is why we have taken this practice question. Now let's look into the next practice question. Kangair Ghati National Park is in which state? The answer to this is Chhattisgarh. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Kindly remember, this was declared a national park in 1982 by the Government of India. It is near Jagdalpur in Bastar region of Chhattisgarh and is one of the densest national park. The Kangair Valley National Park is noted for its heterogeneous land formations ranging from low flat and gentle areas to steep slopes, plateaus, valleys and stream courses. The park is valley of Kangar River. The national park is well known for the presence of subterranean limestone caves with dripstones and flowstones. The formation of stalactites and stalagmites are still growing. This article further makes a note of a fungi called as Ophicordyceps nutans. This is first time discovered in central India and previously it was present in the Western Ghats. What is the significance of this fungus? There is a biological pest which is called as the sting bug. This sting bug causes damages to the flower, fruits of the soya bean, green beans, apple pear and many other agricultural projects. So this fungus can be used as a biological pest to reduce the impact of this pest and at the same time reduce the complications of the pesticides and the insecticides. It also has medical properties as well. The fungi is rich in biologically active metabolites, vitamin C, phenolic compounds and also has anti-inflammatory and antitoxidant properties. The fungus also contains a component called as cordycepin, which has anti-cancer properties. One, it can be used in the agricultural sector, and two, it can be used in the medical sector, is what is the importance of this particular fungus. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following pairs: terms sometimes seen in use and the context with respect to the topic. Belly 2 experiment, is it to do with artificial intelligence? No. Blockchain technology, is it to do with digital cryptocurrency? Yes. CRISPR Cas9, is it something to do with particle physics? No. The answer to this is 2 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, CRISPR Cas9 is a genome editing technique, and apart from that, Belly 2 experiment is a particle physics experiment designed to study the properties of beam agents. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Discuss the importance of surveillance to detect and respond to a pandemic. Next question, private sector participation in passenger train operations is a good idea. Do you agree? Explain. So please write all your answers on the comment section. You guys have a peer review, come up with constructive criticism. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.